Hello once again, watchers of good anime. My name is Pell, and these are my picks for the best anime of winter 2020. If you've seen the other videos that I've done of this nature, you'll be aware that the only anime that I consider for these lists are new ones that are not of established franchises, that don't have current seasons, they did not debut in a previous core, so just know that. So I'm not going to be including anything from fall 2019, such as Welcome to Demon School of Rimakun or Blade the Immortal. Nothing that's currently just ongoing regardless of season, like Boruto. And anything that has just a set established franchise, like certain scientific railgun. And so just know that. If you don't see a favorite on this list, that's probably why. Or I just didn't like it, so that's also possible. Also, if you don't have it, follow me on Kitsu, because it's a cool anime app that allows you to keep track of what you're watching, what you want to watch, what you've completed, and it helps me immensely, and I use it pretty much every day. So, it's not sponsored or anything, but I highly recommend it. My link's in the comments down below, so you can check it out. So without further ado, let us begin this with actually an honorable mention that I wanted to talk about regardless. I didn't want to do a full video about it, but I want to mention it because I think it deserves some means of recognition. And that is, if my favorite pop idol made to the Budokan, I would die. This was a Funimation show about, which focused on two different perspectives of the idol world. You have it from the traditional idols who are on stage and seeing their background and stories and what they are more or less going through with their day-to-day lives. You also have from the perspective of super hardcore fans who go to every show, who are on first name basis with some of the idols that they're super fans of. And what made it stick out to me, and why I just wanted to mention it quick, is that it just works really well in regards to the relationship between its two main characters. You have Aripio, who is the hardcore fan of an idol named Mina, and what makes their relationship stand out to me, and also frustrated me immensely throughout the course of its run, is how bad they are at communicating with each other, because they'll do these fan meets after the shows where they can talk for like 5 seconds for some reason. I don't know why it's that short, but it is. And so they have 5 seconds to talk. They both are monologuing in their heads what they want to say, how much these people mean to each other, and yet they just can't get the words out. And it frustrated me to no end, because it's like if they just hung out outside of these events, then they could actually talk and possibly become friends. Because you see that happen with other idols and these fans throughout the course of the show. Not that they're hanging out one-on-one, but you see them in the real world. They can interact with them normally and get to know them a little bit better than they otherwise would. But also what makes the show good, I think, and why I kind of stuck with it, is the fact that Mina, being someone who has very little confidence, doesn't feel like she's good enough because she's always the lowest ranked in popularity. There's hardly anyone that lines up to do her meet and greets. But she has Aripio, who is always at the front of every show, always goes to her line, and she has just that one supporter who just she knows is immensely loyal to her, who loves her, and that's what kind of gets her through the day by day. And so I just really enjoyed that relationship. I thought it worked really nicely, and I think it's a show worth checking out. It has some cringiness, but it's good. I enjoyed it more than I probably should have. So, moving on to the official top 10 of my 2020 selections. First up is the other idol show which debuted this season, which is 22/7. What drew me into this show initially was the first couple episode arc where we are focused on a young girl named Miu, who has very little self-esteem, is very shy, very not confident. She doesn't do great at part-time jobs, and she eventually gets an invitation to join this idol group. She doesn't know why. She ends up going, meets up with these other girls, and they're basically told, hey, you're going to become 22/7, which is the name of the idol group. She's very against it. She does not like idols. She has no desire to be one, but when she loses her job and has to support her family somehow, she just kind of sucks it up and says, I will do this because it has to support the people that I love. And as you would probably guess, over the course of the show, she grows to love it, and by the finale, she seems to really, really enjoy it. It becomes more or less the unofficial leader of the group. So just seeing that character arc develop and grow throughout the course of the show is also really interesting, but also just seeing the various backgrounds that these various women go through and just seeing where they're coming from and how diverse and different they all are. Also made it for really interesting, because basically every show kind of focused on a different girl, showing where they're coming from, their backgrounds, and just made for a very interesting dynamic as you got to kind of learn more about them and just become more engrossed in their overall story. And then the finale also worked pretty well, I thought, because spoilers, if you haven't realized already, are going to happen throughout this video. They end up having to disband, and then of course they come back together, and throughout the course of the show there's also this like seemingly supernatural wall entity, which is just issuing the orders, and it has to be followed to the word and the letter, and after it starts to talk to them, they break down the wall, discover a secret room, and you basically learn that there's seemingly this like secret organization which brought them together because they're like the chosen ones or whatever. And so if this show does get a season 2, which I kind of hope it does, because I think it'd be super, super interesting, it could dive more into that mystery, and I don't know if it has any actual supernatural elements. I half expected them to become magical girls with the whole chosen one stuff happening, but I'm curious what goes on, because now that we have all the characters established, the world, everything, I'd be really curious to see where this could possibly go. I know it's part of like this idol project thing based on the whole 22/7 brand or whatever. I know nothing aside from the anime though, so if this does continue on, I have no idea how well it did, but if it does continue on, I'd be very curious to see where they end up going from here. At the number 9 spot is Science Fell in Love, so I tried to prove it. This show focuses on a research group at a university where 2 of the main, I guess, scientists or researchers decide that they have fallen in love and they want to investigate the nature of love, what causes it, how one determines if they're in love, and they throw out a lot of scientific stuff. And me not being a science person, that's kind of why it's on the lower end. It's a very funny show overall because the situations that they sometimes put each other in is very comical, and I think it works really well. The relationships work nicely, and they all seem very real, as weird as that might seem sometimes. But yeah, it's kind of a shorter review, and it basically threw out, I think, the first 3 or 4 episodes right away, so it finished like 3 or 4 weeks ago at this point. But it works really well in diving into just the nature of love, and just kind of focusing on various factors that you don't really think about, such as what the optimal kiss time is, or the mood setting, or the best date route, or things of that sort, which you, again, don't really think about because it just generally comes naturally to you, more or less. And so I did like that it had some sort of contrast with one of the, with the other researchers in the group who are just kind of a little bit more knowledgeable about this whole thing, as opposed to the 2 super science people who just haven't really had any major experiences in that realm, who are very much novices when it comes to that stuff. So seeing them try to figure it out through science, which also kind of becomes their wall also, where they're kind of just using that as an excuse not to actually date each other, and just actually focus on it and let their emotions run with it, because that's not rational or logical or whatever. And so it becomes a very fun show. I like the ending. I thought it worked nicely. If it gets the 2nd season, great. If it doesn't, eh. If you're a science person, you'd probably enjoy it a little bit more than I did as well, because it throws out a lot of theories and math stuff, and just stuff that having to try to read it with subtitles and also pay attention to what's happening on screen made it kind of tricky to follow sometimes, but generally it worked pretty well. Next show on this list is about fashion, which is not something I ever thought I would say in regards to an anime that I was watching, but this is called Smile Down the Runway, which you've probably heard of, and it focuses on 2 different protagonists, one who wants to be a fashion designer, one who wants to be a runway model, and it follows their respective journeys over the course of the show. The first few episodes really drew me in, way more than I thought that they would for, again, a show of this concept, but it worked. I did think it kind of lost its drive a little bit, going going further into the season, because this was pretty high up on my list initially, and then just kind of started dropping as the season went on. That said, it does explore a lot of cool intricacies of the fashion world and the fashion industry, which I just am not very versed in whatsoever, because obviously. But you get to learn kind of what goes into designing an outfit, what different things of that sort entail, what different fabrics, what different textures, textiles, and seeing kind of what or how much of a cutthroat industry this can be at times, just being portrayed in this show. Also with the runway stuff, obviously that even has higher standards at times. Our main protagonist being having everything that's really essential to be a model aside from her height, and that's her main obstacle that she has to overcome. For the first couple episodes, she's trying very much to just get some sort of modeling gig, get accepted by an agency, and then even after that happens, she has to just continue to overcome various obstacles, models who have everything that she has but the height, or in addition to the height. And so it's really interesting seeing these two worlds collide, but they also end up relying on each other, and they work together really well as they both kind of lean on each other but also see each other as rivals, and trying to not be left behind by the other person. And so it's a very enjoyable show. It has this kind of shonen feel to it. I think it's a shonen show anyway, but in regards to kind of a tournament arc per se, but it worked well. I enjoyed it overall, and I think it got renewed for a season 2 based on the end card that I saw. So I'm down for more. Next up is a show which I didn't think was going to fall this far down the list, but it did, and that's Inspector. With the first episode of this show, I was very, very hooked, because I thought it was going to be focusing on these two characters who are going to be taking down like troubled spirits or ghouls or what have you, and it's going to be kind of this fighting anime, with like supernaturally elements to it. But no, where it kind of drops for me is the fact that a lot of the episodes focus on just hypothetical theories, because the second and third episode focus on our main female protagonist basically talking to this giant ghost snake, and who is like the guardian of this lake, and he saw somebody drop a body into the lake, so he's trying to figure out why would somebody do that, and so a lot of it is just pure speculation, pure hypothetical. Nothing is actually investigated or solved, and it just it's got kind of annoying because it just seemed pointless. It was just kind of throwing out ideas for the sake of ideas. I can do that. I can't do it as well, but I can do it. And anything that I can personally just do with very little effort doesn't really seem that super interesting to me. That said, when it has more focus on the character relationships, with they're interacting with each other, we get to see kind of them not doing that stuff. It works well. The fights are good and well animated, well choreographed. Like I said, the dialogue is funny. The relationships are comical yet realistic and seems really real. And everything aside from like the theory crafting stuff works good, and it would have been higher if it had just done that. But even the last like 3 episodes are just more or less strictly that, while our main male protagonist, who can regenerate himself, is fighting this evil ghost lady spirit, and while they're just like an internet war or like debate happening to try to like make people believe that she's not real, and it just got kind of dull, honestly. It's good. I don't want to say that it doesn't deserve to be on this list, but the parts that work really well, and that's why it's on here, but it wasn't really what I was expecting, so that's why it's as far down as it ended up being. I'd watch a season 2. I'd watch a season 2 of pretty much everything that I watched this season, honestly, but I don't know, it wasn't my favorite. Number 6 is another show which kind of dropped as the show went on. That's Darwin's Game. And basically the first, like, the whole season is basically like a setup thing, where it's just kind of showing us our main cast, our main characters. The whole, like, basically the first full main arc takes up like 3/4 of the show, if not more. and so its pacing just felt really, really slow. I like the characters, I like their interactions, I think they all have great chemistry, and it's really fun to see them all on screen. But I wish this was a 2-core, because kind of like, to use a not similar example, but similar, Welcome Demon School Rimakun. The first half of that show was a lot of setup. The second half with the second core for this season worked really well because we got to actually dive into plots and they actually did stuff, as opposed to set up the characters and the world and everything of that nature. And so I hope this gets a season 2 because it sets up to be really, really interesting, and it might actually make me read it if it doesn't. But it's good, it's well animated, I like the fight choreography. I think the fights are easily the best part, obviously, as they have to be at this point. But it felt like a lot of setup. The treasure hunting arc just felt so long, so effing long, and it just got kind of annoying as to how long it was going. And so, I don't know. I have no idea if it's supposed to be as long as it was, or they just drew it out for some reason. But yeah, it's good. I say check it out because it's a good show. It's fun to watch, but it doesn't do the best at pacing, I don't think. Now we've hit the top 5. These are shows which I really, really enjoyed over the course of the show, despite my criticisms with some of them. Number 5 is going to be Beaufry, which was not expected initially. This is kind of the black horse, or the dark horse of this whole winter season, I think, because I don't think a lot of people expected a lot from it, but it's just so damn entertaining that I could not help but put it in the top 5. It's a show which was consistently fun, consistently good. If you don't know the basic premise, it basically focuses on this young girl who's very much a novice at VR MMORPGs. She dives into this one that her friend recommends, and because she's such a novice, she decides to put all of her points into defense, as the title would suggest. And so she's able to take a lot more hits and develop a lot more skills, and she just has these very creative ways of getting these other skills which just make her immensely overpowered. But that's kind of the gimmick of the show. It's not like Sword Art Online, where you have just this overpowered protagonist who can just basically take down anything without really a second thought a lot of the time. And so it works well in that way, in that it's very much self-aware of what it's doing. It doesn't try to be super serious, and when it does, it works really nicely. And just seeing Maple, who's the main character, just go into these more and more perilous situations which should just stagger any other player. She just finds these super creative ways to get around them. She develops these really great companions who just work really well, have different dynamics to them, great character models, and it's just a very fun world to see explore, because a lot of it is not focused in the real world. It obviously takes out of that every so often to show Maple and Susie in like school settings, because they're both I think high school students. So in that sense it just adds that more realistic sense to it, but it's just such a fun show to watch, and seeing the different powers develop, see the different enemies that she ends up fighting, it just works really nicely, and I just found myself really, really enjoying it for the entirety of it. Next up is number 4, and this is going to id Invaded, which I was calling ID Invaded for the longest time. Now the general concept of the show is a little bit confusing at times if you're not really sure what's happening. The main idea is that sometime in the future, people have developed a way to harness like these particles that serial killers leave behind at the scene of crimes, and using those particles, they're able to dive into the well, or the id, I guess, of these serial killers, try to figure out who they are, who their victims have been, and try to like save any potential victims that are currently being taken. Main focus though is on our main protagonist, who is the main person diving into these wells, who when he goes into the wells develops this persona of being like the world's greatest detective, basically a Sherlock Holmes character. He basically has to work to solve the murder of this young girl who is showing up in all of these different wells. That's kind of the main like setup for all these, and kind of puts him on his path. What made the show move into the top 4 for me, and at the number 4 spot though, is the main protagonist, and his background and his history, because you can immensely understand why he became a serial killer, basically, because it's not in the traditional sense where he's like kidnapping victims and like killing them for malicious reasons. His family was murdered brutally. It's his wife and his like teen daughter, and it's just some brutal murder. He finds out where the person was who did it, and he just goes on a massacre. And as a result, and him being a police officer, can't really do that. And so he ends up being in prison and is used for these, not experiments, but these investigations. And one of the investigations kind of has him going in a well within a well, similar to like an Inception type of thing. And he's basically able to go back to the life that he had prior to his family dying. And just seeing that emotion build up just really got to me for some reason. I can't relate to it, but just the way it was conveyed and seeing this guy who's basically lost all hope, just believe that he was never going to see his family again, being able to reunite with them as if nothing has happened. And once he's kind of re-woken up by another detective who kind of basically goes into the well to kind of wake him up, he has to choose to let them go again and accept that they have actually died. And just seeing that story come to fruition just worked really, really well to me. And it's not the main part of the show, but it takes place over the course of like 1 or 2 episodes. And it just worked in this really fascinating way for me. And seeing the whole well concept, the idea of these murderers and these killers being used in this different way, and having this instigator behind everything. It was just a really interesting show, and one that I just found myself immensely more captivated with as the weeks went on, because it wasn't really even on my radar initially. And as far as I know, it's an original anime as well, so it doesn't have any source material or anything. But the show worked really well. Its story arc is really fun to watch play out. It's very well choreographed, and every well that they go into is very inventive, very creative, and seeing the various ways that they have to try to navigate them is really fun to see on screen. And so, yeah, it invaded. It's really, really good. It's on Funimation. You can also watch it on Hulu, which is where I watched it. So check that thing out if you're at all interested, because I think it's good. We are now down to the top 3 shows, per my opinion, of winter 2020. This was a list that I mixed around a lot, because I would say that all 3 of these shows are pretty much equal, but I had to rank them, and so this is what I ended up with, and I'll explain why. Number 3 on this list is Toilet Bound Hanako-kun. This is another show which I had no real basis of, and I didn't know what I was getting into with a show that starts with Toilet Bound. But I watched it, and its art style is the first thing which really stands out to you, because it's just so unique, and I haven't really seen an anime do any sort of art style similar to this ever. But I haven't watched a ton of shows compared to other people, but just of what I've seen, like within the last year or so, nothing has really done this art style in this most creative way. And it has a similar tone, I guess, or a similar art style in like what Madoka Magica did when that aired with like the witch stuff, and seeing just the different art style that used. This has kind of a similar idea, and I just really love this show because once it's done with its setup stuff and gets into the core of these characters, seeing what Hanako's backstory is, what his 2 companions are going through, seeing just the various relationships which happen amongst the ghosts. Because it does start out as kind of this like spirit of the week type of situation, where our 3 main characters are investigating these various rumors which are causing students to disappear or seemingly get killed or things of that sort. So they're investigating these, and that's what like the first half of the show pretty much is. But once it starts to dive into showing us, basically an opposite of these main characters, with like Hanako's brother, who he has seemed to have killed in the past, and then he also has a set of companions, which are basically like the opposites, like I said, of our main trio. It seems really interesting. I just really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was super inventive, super creative. It pulled at the emotional heartstrings quite a lot in the second half for me, and it's a gorgeous show to look at. I really like the characters. What did not keep it in the top two though is its ending, because I didn't feel like it really wrapped up an arc in this show by the end, because the last episode just felt like kind of a full circle thing for what happened in the first episode. Because in the first episode, I'm blanking on the other names, but Hanako recruits this young girl to be his assistant essentially after he is summoned by her, and she ends up, I think, eating something which turns her into a fish. And so in the last episode, you have these fish which can talk, I guess, or these spirit fish or something, who want to recruit her to become their queen. And so she basically has to choose between becoming that or staying with Hanako-kun. And obviously, as you could probably guess, she ends up sticking around. And so it felt like not the finale that I was really expecting it to. It worked as a full circle thing for her character arc, but unless the show gets to season 2, which thus far it has not been confirmed for, that I've seen at least, it seemed like a weird place to end it, I thought. It wasn't necessarily the last episode that I was hoping it would be. And so, that said, like I said, it's a really good show otherwise. It just doesn't really necessarily have the most compelling ending, I thought. Especially for something which isn't like a 2-core or is confirmed to have a season 2 coming down the pipeline soon. But yeah, Toyban Hanako-kun on it's on Funimation and Hulu, so check it out. I highly recommend it. It's really, really well done, despite its name. Number 2 on this list is probably the anime which made me tear up the most, and that's because I'm a sap, and that is Somali and the Forest Spirits. The main concept behind this show is that you have this young human girl named Somali. She becomes separated from other humans who are in captivity, and while she is hiding in this forest, she comes across this golem who she just instinctively starts to call Dad, or Tosa. And she just starts following him around, and he eventually decides to take on that title and decides that because his own life is quickly coming to an end, just because golems have this set lifespan, and so he knows how much longer he has to live, he tries to find a way to get her to other humans so that she would be safe. And so that's the main idea behind their journey. They end up going all across the world, trying to track down where a human settlement might be so that he can leave her there so that she is safe. Of course, Somali, being a young girl, does not really know about this whole thing. She just sees the golem as her father, and just knows that they're going on an adventure. And knows that she has to hide the fact that she's a human because they are in a world of monsters, essentially, who will eat her at the slightest knowledge that she is a human girl. This show is very cute, a lot of the times, mainly from Somali, who, kind of like Sweetness and Lightning, just has this immense innocence to her, and this immense joy and wonder about the world around her, which she is seeing for the first time, learning new things, and is just immensely curious. And so it's just an immense delight to see her on screen. She is able to charm pretty much anyone who they meet, just based on that curiosity and that sweetness. It's really compelling to see the golem who just believes that he doesn't have emotions or feelings or a heart or anything of that sort that would define a human pretty much. Just slowly start to develop those things just as he's spending time with Somali, having to take care of her, protect her, and basically comes to see her as his own daughter, essentially. And you have those confirmed in the finale where he tries to leave her side because after defending her from predators, he is very much broken. He has used up a lot of his life force, and he has no idea how much time he even has left at this point. And so, presuming that the show gets a season 2, which I really hope it does, I would think that their journey, which is going to continue, would show them trying to find a way to prolong his life, if not try to get her to a human settlement. And I don't know how this story is going to play out, because I would presume that before she's of an age that she can take care of herself, the golem is going to die at some point and needs to be left with people who can actually take care of her. Because as we learned, there's very few people actually capable of doing that aside from the golem. She would have died in the penultimate episode if he had not gone into this super monstrous form. And so it's a show which I just really found myself enjoying over the course of the show. It's one that I found myself looking forward to more than others on the Thursdays that it aired. And the animation's gorgeous. The character models are all really unique, as it has to showcase all these various monsters and different creatures on screen, even just in the background. Just the different character models look all just really interesting. And I'd actually want to go back and watch it again, just to like look at the background scenes and see just all that type of stuff, as I'm able to focus on that, knowing the story of what's going to be happening. So yeah, Somali and the Forest Spirit, it's really well done. I really highly recommend it, and it's good. And the number one show on this list ended up being Keep Your Hands Off Izukin. What made this show number one for me, just before Somali and Toilet Bound Hanko-kun, is the fact of how consistently good and great it was over the whole course of its season. Because while Somali and Hanko-kun kind of faltered in various parts, I found myself consistently enjoying Izukin. And what, as you probably seen other people talk about, but how this show really stands out is that it focuses on this anime club, or this film club technically, at this school, where these two individuals are super creative. They want to create anime, and you have this other female producer who basically ends up coordinating all the background stuff while they're creating said anime. And so the way that their ideas are portrayed on screen is just immensely compelling and really fun to see play out. And that was what just drew me, and I think everyone else, into the show right off the bat, is that you see these various ideas come to life in front of them. You get to see their imagination in real life, in real time, as they're developing these ideas for like these helicopters and this whole city, and various ideas which could be used in different anime in regards to robot fights and sewer creatures and UFO battles and things of that sort. It all comes to life before them in the city that they live in. And just seeing those ideas eventually come to fruition in anime that they actually get to show us in the actual show, during like film festivals and things of that nature. You get to see those ideas come to life, and it's really interesting. For me personally, who just really loves the behind the scenes ideas of various movies, shows, what have you, that's something that I always like to watch whenever I watch a movie, is like, how was this made? Well, how are different scenes created? Things like that. And so seeing those ideas in that background showcased in this show, kind of seeing what goes into an anime at the very much amateurish level, and what can actually be done hypothetically, it's immensely compelling, immensely interesting, and it ended up being my favorite show of the whole season. It's not as, I would guess, exciting, you could say, as some of the others on this list, but like I said, it was consistently well done, really interesting, and I just found myself enjoying it more than anything else this season, to my shock, I guess, by the end. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the best anime of winter 2020. It's been a weird season for anime, with the whole coronavirus stuff happening, obviously. There's been a couple delays, and having to need recap episodes for some shows. But like I said earlier, I would watch season 2s or continuations of all these shows. I'm very much looking forward to talking about the spring 2020 anime, which is packed full of sequels, so that's going to make for a very interesting top 10 list come June. So that'll be fun. But yeah, I'll be talking about my first impressions of those in a couple weeks once the majority of the shows debut at least 1 or 2 episodes. SAO, I think, is debuting at like the end of April, so I'm probably not going to wait for that one because that would put me into May, and I'm not waiting that long. But yeah, let me know what your favorite shows of the winter 2020 season have been in the comments down below. Follow me on Kitsu as well. The link for that is in the description. It's a really fun app, like I said. Follow me on Twitter and things of that nature. But as always, my people, my name is Nick Pell, and once again, keep on watching.